Hello beautiful souls, Tara Green here, and I'm making a video about why I am no longer vegan after 5 years of being vegan. I've had a lot of questions about this, and I want to first get into a little bit about my background and how I became a vegan and what that was like before I get into how I transitioned out of that and why. So first, a little background. I grew up in a hunting culture, so eating meat was a part of what I've always known. It's part of what it was to be a human. I hunted deer as a teenager. I hunted fish. Fished for fish, not really hunting, but fished for fish regularly. There was periods of time, summers, where I would catch fish nearly every day. So I was well connected with the majority of the meat that I was eating growing up, but I didn't eat all that much meat. I ate meat kind of like, I wouldn't even say every day. I would say maybe, a few times a week. My parents were maybe like more so thinking about the cost of food and being on a tight budget, which is probably why we didn't eat a lot of meat. Like at family gatherings and whatnot, we would occasionally have store-bought meat, like gross, like fried chicken, like who knows where it came from, fried in horrible oils. But that was like not a regular thing for me growing up. So the quality of meat that I was eating when I was eating meat, the majority of the time was stuff that my dad had hunted or fish that we caught. So I grew up, with kind of a pretty good relationship with meat. So I think it's kind of important to look at the background of like consciously eating meat that was so ingrained into me, which is why, speaking of conscious meat, here's a little turkey. Hi, turkey. So this is just a friend. Maybe we'll eat him, maybe we won't. Talk about that later. Anyway. Okay, so back to, yes, I was eating meat growing up, not very often, a few times a week, was very consciously raised, hunted, fished, local meats, but I didn't eat all that much of it. And then the other, so half of my food, especially in the summertime, whenever vegetables, my mother would have a garden, so that was always nice. Vegetable gardens were very nice. Oh my goodness, these turkeys. So my mother would have a garden. That was nice. We would eat vegetables. Aside from that, most of the food I was eating was really low quality. It was like top ramen, which is like bleached white flour with anti-nutrients, probably a lot of that, and like canned foods, canned chili. I remember eating that a lot growing up. So did not have the greatest nutrition growing up, but like half the time I was getting decent stuff, and the meat that I was eating was mostly not from factory farms. So the idea of being vegan was not something I had ever really considered. It was so ingrained into me that eating meat was a part of just what it meant to be a human. Like, we were connected to that, we were part of the process, we hunted them ourselves. Just got a turkey pecking at me. We are a mutually eating society. The turkeys would probably eat me if I was laying here dead. They don't have the ability to kill me, but even though they seem friendly and nice, and here's a bigger turkey. They're friendly and nice. They would probably eat me if my carcass was laying here. They would probably peck it to death and eat it. We are a mutual eating society. This is kind of just side rant, but we are made up of tons of bacteria. The gut microbiome is like living intelligence inside of us, and we're healthy when that is healthy and diverse. And just like constantly death and rebirth is happening. It's this life and death cycle always happening, which is something I connected to before ever being vegan. I felt that life and death cycle very strongly. And that's my background. So let's get into now, why did I become a vegan? in my late teen years, I mean, to be honest, in my early teen years, I had a severe drinking problem. I would party hard, I would drink way too much alcohol. Before I even turned 21, I was pretty much done with drinking because I had partied so hard. This was very hard on my body, destroying my body with alcohol. And once I had moved out of the house, out of my parents' house, I was 14 when I moved out. So I wasn't taking the best care of myself, and I was kind of living on like Taco Bell drive-through, cheap, gross stuff, not really knowing. And eventually all of this kind of added up and took a toll on my body, and I started feeling really sick. By the time I was like 19, I was really feeling the effects. And at that time I also got married. So yeah, these sweet little turkeys down here. So yeah, at that time I was working really hard, and it was just detrimental to my health, and I was coming to get into healthy things. I learned about the food system. I started learning about just like the corruption in all layers, even in plant farming. I was learning about GMOs and pesticides and just like large scale farming and how detrimental that is. So then I started sourcing my food a lot more intentionally. I started going to like farmers markets for what existed. I was living far in the north, and so it's not a great plant growing place. Like there are ranchers and beef grows there. I mean, beef, cattle, cows get raised by grass that grows freely and abundantly, pastures that are just there naturally. So that is why there's a lot of farmers, beef farmers. There are winters, so you have to feed them hay in the winter because it's covered in snow. But yeah, so then I started sourcing my animal products more consciously, buying like local pasture raised animals. And there was like these Hutterite people who were consciously doing dairy, and so I was buying their raw milk, and I got into homesteading. I started growing my own garden. I was doing all these things that were to help me get better. I was connecting to the earth. I was spending a lot of time gardening, and I had my own chickens. I was eating my own eggs. I got into raising my own meat at that point. Hunting was something I grew up with, but it wasn't very feasible because I was living more like right on the outskirts of a city. So I was raising rabbits for meat, and I was raising chickens, ducks, and goats. So I got a lot of hands-on experience, and I just kind of figured it out myself. I would like look things up on YouTube on how to slaughter a rabbit or whatever, and learned how to do that, and was just like really trying to make the most of homesteading and doing it in a conscious way. Like, something I discovered at that point in time, though, was that it was a lot of work, especially in the climate that I was in, and that I couldn't feed my chickens off of my own land, and that saddened me. And same with my goats. I mean, I think if I had equipment and I could have like farmed the land and created like plowed fields and made hay and whatnot, maybe I could have, but it was just not the climate. Like, I've seen where chickens can thrive naturally now, and it's a jungle climate like Hawaii. They live there wild, whereas up in like North Idaho and eastern Washington, where I was living, it's just, yeah, you have to buy grains. So I was buying my grains as consciously as possible, locally grown, corn and soy free, to reduce GMOs or pesticides that I was getting in my grains. And I was raising worms, feeding my chickens worms. Okay, so yeah, lots of background here. Really got into like eating consciously and homesteading before I even went vegan. And then I kind of went vegan as a lot of shifts were happening. I was very chronically ill. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as myofascial encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. So I was just chronically ill, chronically in pain, tired, depressed, just not feeling well. My mental health was not in a great place. I was in therapy, and I couldn't work. I dropped out of school. I was studying psychology and was like 15 credits away from graduating. But yes, my health just was collapsing. But at the same time, so much else was collapsing for me. It was like a paradigm shift in my mind. Like my entire world was changing, my perspective was changing. I recognized that the marriage that I was in wasn't right for me. I was kind of married. I kind of married in such a way that I thought it was what I was supposed to do. It wasn't really what like my soul's truth was. It was like, this is just something I should do. I'm sick. I need someone to take care of me. My parents will be proud of me if I marry a Christian man, whatever it was. But yeah, then my perspective in my mind started expanding a lot, and so I came into a deeper connection with myself and with God in a spiritual way, as opposed to the religion that I was brought up with Christianity and the church. So yeah, this all evolves into exploring other spiritualities for me. I ended up very sick for a couple of weeks. It's actually around the time I was having like all these food sensitivities, and I started cutting everything out of my diet, and I did a food sensitivity test that said I was sensitive to like pork and beef and things and eggs, and so I had to cut all this stuff out. It wasn't even that much of a major food source for me anyway. So at that point I was just like, wow, the only thing I'm really eating is like chicken eggs from my own chickens or duck eggs. And at that point it was like, well, why don't I just try going vegan? Because that's a thing. Like everyone was going vegan. Like over the last 5 to 10 years, it's like really boomed. Veganism has become really popular. And morally, it made sense for me because also at the time I was like kind of aligning with the philosophy of being an anarchist, as in anarchy, the prefix "an" meaning without, and archy as in archons or rulers, like being without rulers, because I was coming to awareness of the system and how corrupt it was, and that it just didn't make sense. So much of it didn't make sense, and that's something I felt intuitively since I was a kid, and it just really didn't make sense to me. But it was finally clear, and I just was not fitting into the system. It wasn't healthy for me. So with the mindset of anarchy and how that like aligns with veganism is that to be like without rulers means to be without slavery. And so then I had to like look at the principles of nonviolence and the philosophy of do no harm but take no shit. So that is like the simplest one rule that we could all, if we could all just live by this, then we would live in peace and harmony if everyone was nonviolent towards each other. And also bringing that responsibility onto oneself of be nonviolent, but also protect yourself from violence occurring to you, because you can't just like outsource all the responsibility onto other people. We also have to protect ourselves because, you know, there's like even weather could be violent towards us. We have to have a drive to live, to be able to eat. We have to build a house. We have to put our clothes on our back. We have to eat, right? So nonviolence goes into that. Well, like, why don't we apply that to the animals, right? Like, if we can live without eating animals, it makes complete sense that we would. If we are actually able to thrive and be healthy without killing animals, why wouldn't we? It makes complete sense. So, and I also have recognized in the system that we're in that there's a lot of illusion, and there's a lot of things that we might think is true, but it's not necessarily true. It's just the history that we've been told. So as I began questioning those things, you know, you might call that conspiracy theory or whatever, but you can research that, and so much is true. So many conspiracy theories are actually just truth, and we've been told a false history. So I applied that to our diet and everything as well. It's like, well, what am I being told about diet, and is that really true? So our ancestors evolved eating meat. That's basically the majority of humanity, for as long as we've known, have incorporated animals as foods into our diet. But I was like, okay, well, let me question that. What if that's not what needs to happen? What if, what if we can thrive without killing? And I felt very passionate and radical to experiment on myself with this and give it a try. And more than just give it a try, I fully believed it, because I also believe that if you don't believe in something, if you're like hesitant and skeptical about it, can you really even receive the benefits of it? Like, because so much of our power is in our intention and our mindset, that if we believe something, then it will be. So if I believed that I could thrive on a vegan diet, I could. And so I believed that wholeheartedly. I maybe started out a little softer, but as the years went on, I was fully immersed in my ideology and my belief of that it was the right way, and that we did not need to kill animals to eat, that we could thrive. My perspective, my ideology, my mindset, I truly believed that I believed humans could thrive on eating plants alone. I did a lot of research as well on like what nutrients that I would need to get, and I was very intentional preparing all of my meals with a lot of intention and love and just like diverse nutrients. So on to my vegan dietary journey. I once watched a clip of somebody making fun of ex-vegans because they were like, journey. They all say it's a journey. Well, everything is a journey. We're in continual motion, right? It's not a destination. And veganism was a destination for me. That was my intention. It was like, here I am. This is the way that I will be. This is the way it is. This is the best way to be. And with that, I didn't believe this at first, but there truly grew a sense of self-righteousness within myself, because I felt like I was better than everyone else. I was making this like holy righteous choice that other people were just like, they couldn't see. They were not awake. They didn't see that we just need to not eat animals. Like, it's so simple. Like, killing animals is murder. We don't need that. If we don't need that, then it's murder, right? And I really believed we didn't need it. Come to find out, after 5 years of eating this way, here's been my experience. So initially I felt better. I felt good. I left my marriage. I went vegan. I got cats for the first time in my life. I moved out of my house. I lived out of my car. I traveled around. I met people connected to I went to permaculture convergences. I got into my spirituality a lot more, like exiting Christianity, getting into paganism, earth-based spirituality, recognizing so much more, being so connected to nature, and having had those experiences with animals, both like in my past and of thinking like, okay, yeah, we eat animals, that's way of life, and then shifting that to like, whoa, maybe we don't need to eat animals and that we can actually thrive and be healthy without. But after initially feeling better, which makes sense because I stopped eating like Domino's pizza and like gross conventional hot wings and things like that, I stopped eating all of those things. And I was eating a lot of plants. Plants can be very cleansing. Plants are full of antioxidants. They can cleanse our bodies from, who knows what, toxins. I don't know. There's debate and question on inflammation and plants causing it or reducing it, and I think that depends on the plant. But yeah, so I initially I was feeling pretty good. I was feeling really cleansed. I was feeling light. I think it was like having it was sort of like having a colonic, like having all the mass amounts of fiber just like pushing through my body and cleansing it from my entire life of just bad stuff that I had put in my body. And as time went on, I continued traveling, and it did honestly become more and more difficult as time went on. I started feeling fatigued. I didn't have a lot of energy. I had to eat a lot. I felt like I was always working at eating. I was making food all the time. It was just such a big part of my life, meal prep, because to actually do veganism right requires so much effort and intention. So like as far as grains and legumes go, I was soaking and sprouting them. This takes a lot of time and intention. Soaking and sprouting your legumes every day, preparing, thinking ahead about what your next meal is going to be, and sourcing the vegetables as consciously as possible, which wasn't always possible. And sometimes I was in positions like traveling. If I was down in Mexico, there wasn't really access to organically grown, like sustainable farmed things. Like, things were very conventional. They had pesticides on them, certainly. And then even up in the northern parts that I was living in at times, like in Washington, shipping food from Mexico or from even farther, wherever it was, like vegetables and fruits wrapped in plastic being shipped across the country in a truck using tons of fuels. And then how were those plants farmed? They were mass farmed. They were in these huge like fields that plows just plowed right through. And even in organic farming, there's a form of pesticides or insecticides. It's just there's different rules and regulations. It's maybe not as bad, but it's still not great. And the style of farming, it's not permaculture. It's not companion planting. It's not harmony between all of the things in nature. It's not. It's actually, yeah, it's not harmonious necessarily. It's just killing lots of animals. So for example, a field that's used to grow a crop like a legume, it could have been a diverse meadow that had like a few trees, and it could have had grass naturally, and then there would have been layers and layers of life that was supporting each other in a way. Like, you know, you've got down at the small level, you have the microbes in the soil, living microbe, you have the mycelium network from the fungi that's reaching all over and communicating between the plants. There's the worms in the ground helping turn the soil into more nutrient dense soil for the plants. There's different kinds of bugs. There's flies, there's bees, there's butterflies, there's pollinators, there's wildflowers, there's different types of grasses. There's just so much life, a diversity of life, and they're all supporting each other. And maybe there's some cows on that land or some chicken, and they just coexist and they don't destroy the field. They're just grazing, and it's actually helping, and it's part of this like sustainable closed loop ecosystem, whereas plant farming is not that way. So as time went on, I kind of ignored that because I got so used to just like the idea of like flesh being gross, like eating meat, like it was murder, it was murder, chicken. Okay, so yes, turkey friend. Yeah, meat was just so gross to me. The idea of it, the smell of it, I couldn't stomach it. I was disgusted by it. The ideology for me grew so strong that it was like a spiritual belief system at this point. It was like religion. And so yeah, so even though I was like becoming sort of aware, I was like ignoring that and turning a blind eye to the like horrible plant farming and like what that actually looks like. And while I had at one point grown a lot of the plants myself, it's just not realistic or possible for me to, at this point in my life, grow a bunch. It wasn't to grow all my plants and sustain off of them, which comes into another piece because I now don't even believe that it's a good idea to try to sustain myself off of plants alone based on my experience. So important parts, you know, my nutritional upbringing, it wasn't the greatest. So that kind of set me up with like maybe not the best, like I didn't grow as optimally as I could have. I could have had a better diet as a child that would have set me up for a better future, that maybe would have allowed me to last longer on a plant-based diet. But with that background in mind, and my genetics play a role, of course. Everyone's genetics are different. Some people will be able to handle certain foods better than others. So yeah, several years into being vegan, I ended up getting pregnant, and this is very demanding on the body. It requires so much to create a life. So much energy goes into that. And throughout my pregnancy is when it got really hard for me. It was already difficult. The year prior, I was like, I had lost my center. I was no longer grounded. I was easily reactive. I was just on edge all the time. Like, it was just difficult to do things because I was so low energy and I was having to constantly eat. But my mindset was so strong that I just kept telling myself like I was doing the best thing, I was doing the right thing, and that it was just I wasn't supported in other ways to do the plant-based diet. I didn't have enough time, I didn't have enough money, whatever it was. It's just I just need to eat more plants, I just need to eat better plants. That's the solution. So I kept trying, but To what end? My partner saw what was going on and tried to feed me meat and animal products. And my partner, just to throw into this, was vegan for 9 months about. He went vegan to be with me, to please me, because it was so important to me that he tried it. And it wasn't vibing with his body. So he started eating meats again around that time. And he was offering me stuff. And I was just like disgusted. It was a huge issue in our relationship, especially now that I'm having a child. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to raise our child? I want to raise my child vegan. You know, what is this going to be like? And I was just not doing well. And even though I had medical checks and got my blood levels tested and everything, it seemed like I was doing fine as far as the nutrients and things that were showing up. It was just still so difficult. So I ended up at one point, I was just starving all the time. I had morning sickness every day for my entire pregnancy. Even the day I gave birth, I was throwing up that day. So towards the third trimester of my pregnancy, I eased into eating animal products by first eating oysters. I chose oysters because, well, I felt like I was literally going to die if I didn't do something. So I tried it, and I felt so much better, extremely better after eating oysters. I was so sustained. They were just canned smoked oysters. I craved it. I went and ate it. And also, just to throw in there, it was so obvious that I was craving meat, but I was ignoring it. It's obvious in such a way that I was going as far as to eating like Beyond Burger, because a burger just sounded so good, but I would refuse to let myself think that I actually wanted meat. Like, ew, no. But yeah, Beyond Burger, gross. Like, I can't believe I even ever ate that. I just want to give my body such better nutrients now. And I was eating I got to the point where I was so hungry that I stopped eating as healthy of vegan foods because I was so desperate for nutrition. I started eating fake cheeses, fake meats, because I was just missing that, and I was so desperate for that real dense nutrients, for the fats. There's so many vitamins that are fat soluble that we can't really absorb. We can't get them as much from plants. Like, like you might say, oh, there's a certain amount of nutrients in this plant, but how bioavailable is it? Because your body may not be able to actually use all of those nutrients because of the form that they're in. And when we eat something that comes from an animal, it's already been converted to a form that's a lot easier for our body to break down. So the oysters were just really amazing, like saving my life. And I started to have days where I threw up pretty much every day, but there were times where I didn't throw up, and it was like because I ate really sustaining meat that actually would stay in my body for a long enough time. But I was still really against it, my ideology, having a hard time with it. So it was few and far between. I was just eating cans of smoked oysters a little bit, justifying to myself that they were the closest thing to a plant that was no longer a plant, like because they were like a mussel, and they didn't have I think they actually do have a central nervous system, but just that maybe they were just lesser on the intelligence and food chain consciousness scale. So after eating the oysters, I was so much craving a burger, so I decided to go for a bison burger, being that bison is an animal native to the land that we're on, that it would be like this primal ancestral, holistic, like nourishing food connecting to the land, that the indigenous people on these lands ate animals, and buffalo specifically, and that was a huge part of life and sustaining life, that I was called to eating buffalo. So I ate buffalo burgers, and oh my goodness, that was so sustaining. It was saving my life. I felt so much better. Literally gotta tell you, now what amazes me so much about eating animal products is that I can eat food, and I'm a breastfeeding mother. I can go several hours without eating and I feel okay, and it's awesome. And that was not the case when I was eating plant-based. In the future, I will share more about what type of foods I was eating as a vegan, but like, as I said, it was really good at first for the majority of it. Then I got so desperate and hungry, I started eating fake cheeses and fake meats, but I was trying to get the most conscious, best, healthiest, pure ones. a huge problem I see with the bad things I was putting in my body was that there was some seed oils and things. Like I would eat chips or something that was fried in like a bad oil, but I didn't do it a whole lot, but nonetheless I did it. So and then there's a certain amount of plants like that can be bad because there are anti-nutrients in plants, and if you overload your body in that, it can pull the minerals out of your body. And just again, like plants may have nutrients in them, but can you use them? Why I was soaking and sprouting my grains was to minimize the anti-nutrients and make them more absorbable. But as I started eating more processed foods, most of the time when you buy bread or crackers or whatever, it's not going to be soaked and sprouted. So, and then there's the minus the animal foods, because without the fats and the proteins and things that are more bioavailable from animal foods, I just wasn't getting enough nutrients, and I didn't have as much energy, wasn't able to thrive anymore. I was no longer thriving. So slowly, as I flipped from the spectrum of being all plants and that extreme ideology, which was so difficult for me to overcome, I went through like this major identity shift again. And it's interesting because like I had dreads for the majority of the time that I was vegan, and it was like this story in my hair. And soon after having my baby, a month after, I had shifted so much as who I was. I was making room for becoming a new person, for becoming a mother, and for growing into such a person that could like have an ego death of that self-righteous vegan philosophy, and just like humbling myself to recognizing that we are a mutual eating society and that it was not good for my health. It was hurting me, and that I actually need to eat animals in order to thrive. So yeah, that was a huge, difficult process for me. So I shaved my head, and now my hair is this long. This is how much I've been eating, like this is how long I've been eating meat for, is this long. And yeah, I'm recovering. And so another huge part of what was going on during my pregnancy is that I was having dental issues. It's a little windy here, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I know the wind is probably going to pick up in the microphone a little bit. So wait for that to die down. Okay, so dental issues. I probably don't have the greatest teeth genetics, just as a precursor, but I was having pain in my mouth, throbbing. I had visible cavities, so I went to a dentist, and there was like mixed information about getting dental work while you're pregnant, which I've come to understand that I think it's better to get the work than to not get the work. But anyway, I waited for as long as I could, but I ended up getting work. I mean, I went and saw a dentist, and he was like recommending I wait or whatever. So I ended up getting fillings from him once my baby was born. I had like in my gum line, there was a lot of cavities. So I ended up having those filled, and I really believed in my vegan diet so hard that I thought my teeth would be fine. So I didn't go to the dentist for several years, thinking that I was eating the best diet, that my teeth were probably just all going to heal themselves, that my cavities would just heal. And they just kept getting worse. So I did end up getting them filled, and I unfortunately had a dentist that I don't think was very good, because my fillings fell out. One of them fell out the same day that I got the fillings. The other ones were just super painful, and they weren't bonded correctly, but I told the dentist and he didn't check the work, and he put the other filling back in after about 3 weeks of it being out and like having severe nerve pain. At that point, yeah, he put the fillings back in. There was something going on though, like there was like something serious, like the pain did not stop. So I ended up having teeth extracted one by one to try to get the pain out of my mouth. I didn't want to have root canals. I was under the impression that root canals can leave infection deep down in your body, and it could cause long-term chronic health issues. So I was under the impression that it's better to pull the tooth and then replace it with an implant. I am not really sure, to be honest with you, my opinion on whether or not that is the best course of action. That's just the one that I chose to take. It's a bit windy right now, so I don't know if you can hear me. I'm kind of pausing. as the winds die down, but they're really swift. Okay. So anyway, I end up having teeth pulled, and I'm still in the midst of a dental journey. There's so much going on. I'm getting a lot of work done in my mouth, and if you've heard of Weston A. Price Foundation, that is a dentist who did a bunch of research around the world on different diets and cultures and teeth, and like viewing cultures that had really good teeth and seeing what they ate. Something that they ate was animal products. All of the cultures with really good teeth did incorporate nose to tail animal products, including organ meats, bone broth, marrow, the whole thing, as well as plants. They had a holistic diet. They ate a lot of fiber, which is full of prebiotics, which feeds our gut health. So it's all important. And in my journey to no longer being a vegan, there was a point in time where I flip-flopped on an extreme of carnism, of like just eating so much meat because it had been so long that I was just like, oh my God, meat. It's like, what was I missing? I was eating steak with red wine, and it was just like a spiritual experience. It's like orgasmic. It's so amazing. Yeah, and then I was essentially basically just eating fruit and meat, and I think that was also necessary, and I felt way better. And I like fruit and meat and organs and bone broth, because fruits are the least toxic plant. They're very cleansing, and meats are very sustaining, very nourishing. So I was like recovering essentially, and I'm still recovering, and I'm still healing my teeth and going through this whole dental journey. It's only been, so my baby's a year and a half, and I've been eating meat, I would say, solidly since she was about a month old. I was eating some like a couple months before that, but it was just like little bits, few and far between, really easing into it, like just canned oysters and then the Bison Burgers, and went from there. So yeah, so I've been back on eating animals. I eased into it slowly. So it's been about a year and a half that I've been now eating animals. And it was like this, like I said, kind of this opposite polar, where like from eating all the vegetables, I had to eat like a lot of animal products to see what that was like. And now I'm kind of finding a balance and a middle point where I recognize that plant foods are important, but there are also toxic plants, and that we have to be cautious about how we use them, and not to think that they're just like, we shouldn't just overindulge in plants. Plants can be dangerous, and that we have to properly prepare plants, soaking, sprouting. Maybe there's certain plants that we want to avoid entirely because they're toxic, and actually the majority of plants that exist are poisonous. And plants want to live just like animals want to live. Everything here is put with a desire to live, which is why plants have anti-nutrients and toxins. It's a defense mechanism within themselves. So yeah, I think this video is probably long enough, so I'm going to wrap it up. But that's essentially a little bit about what brought me to where I am now, with what my background was, how I became vegan, and what it's been like for me now, recovering, why I did it, dental health, energy levels, all of that, so much. And there's even more that I could share that is a spiritual aspect to things, where I feel a lot more grounded and holistically connected, and part of the cycle of death and rebirth. And I just want to say that if you feel shame and guilt about what you're eating, that you are worthy. You're worthy of thriving. You're worthy of eating nutritionally dense, sustaining foods that your ancestors ate, that you evolved on, that you're meant to eat. It is your, I suppose, God-given right from source, from spirit, from creator, why we're here on this planet. There are things that are unpleasant. This place is full of light and dark, and death and rebirth, and yeah, life and death. So it's not easy, and even if we weren't to eat plants, we would still have to like do stuff like dig a hole in the ground, which would disrupt and kill ants, or cut down a tree, or whatever it is to build a house. We have to survive. We have to have a drive to thrive and to live. And in order to really thrive and live in harmony with nature and be our best selves, living in a symbiotic relationship with all of the organisms around us, we need to think beyond just flesh and plants, because it's so much more than that. We need to think holistically and about every little thing. It's not just about the animals. Think about the tiny little living things that you might not see. They're not as easy to see, but those are just as important. So yeah, I just want you to know you're worthy of nutrients, and that you don't need to feel shame or guilt around what you're eating. You are worthy. You're here. You have a great purpose. You're here to share your gifts with us and thrive. So, hope you enjoyed this story about my journey. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Like and subscribe for more. Let me know what you think I should make a future video on, if there's more that you'd like to know about my journey. And you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok. Mostly I'm found at Omens of Alchemy. All right, blessed be everyone. Stay wild and free.